back to our continuing Bible study series on the life lessons that we can learn from the life of Moses. As a refresher, last Sunday morning we learned from the life of Moses in Exodus chapters 33 and 34, 3 biblical principles how to get a glimpse of God's glory. And friends, I firmly believe that if more of God's blood-washed, born-again Christians would get even just a little bitty glimpse of God's glory, we could turn this world upside down for Christ again. Now, if you desire to get a glimpse of God's glory here on earth, you must seek God's pardon, seek God's presence, and seek God's person. This Sunday morning, we are continuing our Bible study series on the life lessons that we can learn from the life of Moses in Numbers chapter 10 through 14. That's a long set of chapters there, but we'll get through it all right. So, in Numbers chapter 10, verses 1 through 10, God's holy word declares, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Make thee 2 trumpets of silver, of a whole piece shalt thou make them, that thou mayest use them for the calling of the assembly, and for the journeying of the camps. And when they shall blow with them, all the assembly shall assemble themselves to thee at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And if they blow but with one trumpet, then the princes, which are heads of the thousands of Israel, shall gather themselves unto thee. When ye blow an alarm, then the camps that lie on the east part shall go forward. When ye blow an alarm the second time, then the camps that lie on the south side shall take their journey. They shall blow an alarm for their journeys. But when the congregation is to be gathered together, ye shall blow, but ye shall not sound an alarm. And the sons of Aaron, the priests, shall blow with the trumpets, and they shall be to you for an ordinance forever throughout your generations. And if ye go to war in your land against the enemy that oppresseth you, then ye shall blow an alarm with the trumpets, and ye shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and ye shall be saved from your enemies. Also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings, and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God." I like how he emphasizes that at the end. But the Israelites were still at Mount Sinai when God instructed Moses to make these 2 trumpets of silver to use for summoning God's people and for breaking camp. When both trumpets sounded, the entire community was to assemble at the entrance of the tent of meeting or tabernacle, which represented God's presence. Now, this is a wonderful picture, if you will, of a future event, which is well described in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 16 through 17. It says, "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then which we are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord." I love those verses. They tell us of the beginning of the end times. This is the rapture, of course, that it is speaking of. And when I read God's instructions there to Moses, that's the first thing that comes to my mind, is how we are going to be called up to meet Jesus in the air by the trump of God. And I'll look forward to that day. But we still have a lot of work to do before then. So don't just say, well, Roy said it could be any time soon, so I can quit working. No, don't do that. We need to keep serving God at all times. Even up to the last second of that trump, we need to be serving God. But friends, I have to ask, are you listening for that trumpet call? I desire to hear that trumpet call. More so than I probably ever have in my past. Growing up, didn't even know about it. Played the trumpet, but didn't know anything about the trump of God. But I look forward to that day when all the stress of this world, all the evils that surround us won't matter to us anymore, when God calls us up by the trump of God to meet with him in the air, and ever shall we be with the Lord. I love that. But the Israelites spent about 11 months in the shadow of Mount Sinai. Then, in the second year after their departure from Egypt, the cloud lifted from God's tabernacle, and the Israelites set out for the promised land. The Ark of the Covenant went before them with the Shekinah glory of God hovering over them by day. During that time, Moses encountered several very discouraging situations. And from this chapter of Moses' life, we will learn 3 biblical principles to defeat discouragement. First one is simply thankfulness defeats discouragement. We're going to be in Numbers chapter 11. I'm not going to read the entire chapter straight through, but because of fatigue, we as Christians all get discouraged from time to time. And of course, it was the same with Moses. He was a human, and he had human flesh and weaknesses. So God's Shekinah glory led Moses and the Israelites toward the wilderness of Paran, a region northeast of Mount Sinai. And it says here in Numbers 11, verses 1 through 3, and when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. And Moses called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. Only 3 days after leaving Mount Sinai, the Israelites were already complaining about their hardships. This attitude of ingratitude angered God, who sent fire to consume some of the people on the outskirts of the camp. The Israelites, of course, cried out to Moses, who prayed to God, and the fire stopped. Ingratitude always angers God. But we can find the cure for ingratitude in Psalm 103, verse 2. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. The word benefits refers to God's blessings or rewards. And while I don't know none about all y'all, I know that God's blessings in my life are too numerous to count. So sure, maybe we cannot remember each and every one of all of God's many blessings in our lives, but surely we should not forget them all either. As Brother Barton mentioned earlier, there are too many blessings in our lives to not be thankful. Sometimes it's as simple as opening our eyes in the morning, taking a breath, and being able to sit up and stand up. There are days, this week has been very painful for me. My back has been flaring up, and this morning in particular was very bad. I was already at the point of pain where I felt like I was going to collapse. That's how I started my morning. But yet I am thankful that God got me up and that God has taken a lot of that pain away already this morning. But there's no way I would be able to stand up at all this morning very long. The amount of pain I'm in is just ridiculous. I don't enjoy it at all. And I've been on my feet all week, and I think that's probably part of it combined with the weather. But anyway, it says, forget not all God's benefits. Are you remembering God's blessings in your life? You should. Just like the song says, count your many blessings. Name them one by one. The more time you spend thanking God for your blessings, the less time you will spend complaining about your wants or the lack of what you want. Focus on what is most important, God, and what God has done for you. And anyway, continuing in Numbers chapter 11, verses 4 through 9, and the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away, yet there is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. And this manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof as the color of bdellium. And the people went about and gathered it and ground it in mills, or beat it in a mortar and baked it in pans and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was as the taste of fresh oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. For those Israelites, God was still actively providing manna from heaven each and every day, and yet still the Israelites complained when they remembered the various foods of Egypt. Now again, when it talks about the manna here, it's not a bread that you can just pick up off the ground and eat. It requires that they have prepared it in some way. It says they ground it in mills or beat it in a mortar, baked it in pans, and made cakes of it. And here it talks about the taste of fresh oil. which I don't know. I'm not a fan of fresh oil or dirty oil. It doesn't matter. I don't think I want to drink it. But it's a pleasant taste, and yet they are complaining. But then continuing, verses 10 through 15, then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased, and Moses said unto the Lord, wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? And wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them? That thou shouldest say unto me, carry them in thy bosom? As a nursing father beareth a sucking child unto the land which thou swearest unto their fathers? Whence should I have flesh to give unto all this people? For they weep unto me, saying, give us flesh that we may eat. I am not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. With the continued complaining, Moses became distraught in discouragement and complained to God that he was simply not good enough or not strong enough to lead these people. I understand how Moses felt, and I believe most Bible teachers and preachers feel similarly. God can use even the most useless of people like me. You should never feel inadequate to be used by God, to be able to serve God. As I mentioned, I believe it was last week, all you need are two things: the willingness to serve and the willingness to allow God to use you. That's all you need. It doesn't matter whether you graduated Bible school or not. It doesn't matter if all you are is just a lowly fisherman or maybe a tax collector. I'll bet God could use them just as well as He uses anyone else. In fact, of course, you know I'm talking about the apostles. God used them, and for the most part, they were just normal, everyday, average men and of lowly standing as well. So don't feel that God cannot use you. See, Moses was discouraged because he was fatigued. Fatigue often discourages us. Whenever we fight a battle that lasts for weeks or months or years, we just get worn down physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And when we are fatigued, molehills look like mountains, causing us to feel overwhelmed like Moses. But Moses was fatigued because he had been trying to carry the heavy burden of leading 2 million people all by himself. However, God had a wonderful solution. God used those problems to teach Moses about leadership and delegation. In verses 16 and 17, and the Lord said unto Moses, gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with me. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone. God told Moses to gather 70 men who were elders and leaders and bring them to the tent of meeting. And then God told Moses he would give them the same Spirit that God had given unto Moses. I like that. We need to remember that, again, they were not originally called, but God was able to use these leaders within the community, because God can place His Spirit upon anyone He so chooses. Again, you have to be willing. That's the key word, a willing servant. But God knows that a good leader must learn to delegate so he can focus on what only he can actually get done. No more would Moses have to bear that heavy burden alone. Not anymore. And God also promised to answer their food complaints too, to which Moses asked in Numbers 11, 22 and 21 and 22, and Moses said, the people among whom I am are 600,000 footmen, and thou hast said, I will give them flesh that they may eat a whole month. Shall the flocks and the herds be slain for them to suffice them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to suffice them? Moses did as God instructed, and he brought the 70 elders together, and God blessed them. And it says that when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied and did not cease. So God is doing what he promised to do. But then God answers Moses' complaint. And there went forth a wind from the Lord and brought quails from the sea and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side and as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. And the people stood up all that day and all that night and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. He that gathered least gathered 10 homers. And they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And Moses called the name of that place Kibroth Hattava, because there they buried the people that lusted. God took care of the complaint for meat by delivering quail that piled up about 3 feet deep. The Israelites, however, apparently did not trust God to provide more meat. So what did they do? They went out and caught quail all day, through the night, and all the next day. No one gathered less than about 6 bushels per person. That's a lot of quail. Now, granted, quail ain't got a whole lot of meat on them, but still, they got meat. So 6 bushels is still a lot of meat. But because of their lack of faith in God for providing more food and their sin of gluttony, God was angry with them. So while they were gorging themselves on that meat, even while it was still in their mouth, God smote the people with a very great plague. Now, exactly what that was, who knows? Some people say, well, maybe God made the meat turn bad and they all had food poisoning. Could be. I don't know. It doesn't say. It just says a very great plague. So Moses named that place the Graves of Lust. I liked how Moses named it, the Graves of Lust, to remind people this is why people died, because of their lust and gluttony. So while lust and fatigue can cause discouragement, thankfulness always defeats discouragement. In all things, give thanks. As well, forgiveness defeats discouragement. In Numbers chapter 12, verses 1 and 3, and Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman who he had married. For Moses had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath God not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek, above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. Few things are as discouraging as trying to do God's will and when suddenly facing a misunderstanding with the people who are following you. Moses, his 2 siblings, Miriam and Aaron, turned against him because he had apparently married a Cushite woman, probably after his wife Zipporah died. The Cushites were descendants of Cush, the son of Ham and grandson of Noah, and were inhabitants of the land of Cush, or ancient Ethiopia, which is also modern Sudan. Cushites, also called Ethiopians, had a very dark skin. But Miriam and Aaron's complaint was not about skin color, though. Rather, apparently, Miriam and Aaron were more worried about Moses' new wife being a threat to their positions of leadership. Rather than dealing with their envy and insecurity, they complained against their own brother. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, come out ye 3 unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. And the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam. And they both came forth. And God said, hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. And the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and God departed. So God rebuked them for speaking against Moses and reminded them that he had chosen Moses. Well, obviously not all people who claim to be called by God are actually ordained by God. Speaking against a man chosen and used by God is equivalent to speaking against God who chose him in the first place. You better be careful what you complain about or who you complain about. But then in Numbers chapter 12, verses 10 through 16, God's holy word declares, and the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let Miriam not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed when he cometh out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal Miriam now, O God, I beseech thee. And the Lord said unto Moses, If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. And afterward the people removed from Hazeroth and pitched in the wilderness of Paran. So God punished Miriam with leprosy until Moses prayed for her healing. Again, I mention this, the power of intercessory prayer is demonstrated for us again. Never doubt the power of your prayers for others. One reason why Moses had such a close personal relationship with God is how he reacted to problems. Moses practiced that godly act that Paul taught in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 13. Forbearing one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. Moses had every right to be upset because his own brother and sister were attacking him. But rather than that, he forgave them and prayed to God on their behalf. There's a lesson for you right there. So if you want to defeat discouragement, instead of being consumed with hate or anger, thankfulness and forgiveness defeats discouragement. And finally, faith defeats discouragement. In Numbers chapter 13, verses 1 through 3, we read, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men, that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel. Of every tribe of their fathers shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among them. And Moses, by the commandment of the Lord, sent them from the wilderness of Paran. All those men were heads of the children of Israel. From Kadesh and Paran, God instructed Moses to send 12 spies, one for each of the tribes of Israel, to explore the land of Canaan. Of special interest in those chosen were Caleb, representing Judah, and Hoshea, representing Ephraim. For reasons not given, Moses changed Hoshea's name to Joshua, which means Yahweh, Jehovah, is salvation. In Numbers 13, verses 17 through 20, Moses issued instructions to the 12 spies and dispatched them on their mission. And then in verses 21 through 24, God details their journey. Not really details, it's like 4 verses, but explains what they did. But then let's look at Numbers 13, 25 through 33. And they returned from searching of the land after 40 days. And they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them and unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told Moses and said, We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey. And this is the fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land, which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature. And there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. After exploring the land for 40 days, the spies returned to report to Moses and the Israelites that it was indeed a land that flowed with milk and honey. That's the good news. Then they reported the bad news, that the people living there were strong and their cities were large and fortified. And they also added that they saw descendants of Anak, who were very strong and tall. Then the people began to fear. You see, that is how Satan works. All Satan needs is to plant even just the smallest seed of doubt into our minds, and we will do the rest. We will grow that one tiny little seed of doubt into a massive redwood tree and forget all about God's power and faithfulness, and instead fear. At this point, Caleb earned his fame in Numbers 13:30. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." You got to like Caleb. He had faith in God. He knew that God had already delivered through him all that other stuff. Surely God would deliver him again. He knew that. He trusted. Unfortunately, the 10 of the other spies declared their fear that God was not able to take the land because in comparison to those giants, they felt like little grasshoppers. But the men that went up with them said, "We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." Who cares? Who is stronger than you? God is. Who is stronger than them? Well, God is. But then in Numbers 14, the Israelites began to cry, and they wept all that night. Then again they grumbled against Moses and Aaron. They also plotted amongst themselves to choose a new leader to lead them back to Egypt. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes, and they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, "The land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land, and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not." Joshua and Caleb attempted to reason with their fellow Israelites, but to no avail. It says, "But all the congregation bade stone them with stones." Unfortunately, that's still true today. When you try to preach God's truth and God's holy word, Christians get offended when you tell them, the things that we're not supposed to do according to God's holy word. They get offended when you tell them that we're required to live a holy life as commanded by God and God's holy word. Same thing. Same exact thing. We cannot talk bad about the Israelites when we talk bad about the Bible teachers and preachers who preach God's holy word. I'm telling you, folks, you've heard it said before, sin is still wrong. Doesn't matter whether it was Old Covenant or New Testament or modern day, sin is still sin. And the wages of sin is still death. Yes, we live in grace, but that doesn't give us the right to be sinners as much as we possibly can. God forbid. It is a sad state of affairs when God's people get upset for someone actually preaching God's truth. Very, very sad state of affairs. But in the midst of that chaotic rebellion, God appeared in his Shekinah glory at the tabernacle and once again tested Moses. And the Lord said unto Moses, "How long will this people provoke me? And how long will it be ere they believe me for all the signs which I have showed among them? I will smite them with the pestilence and disinherit them, and will make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they." But Moses, who was obviously concerned about the welfare of God's people, interceded on their behalf again. And Moses said unto the Lord, "Then the Egyptians shall hear it, for thou broughtest up this people in thy might from among them. And they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land, for they have heard that thou, Lord, art among this people, that thou, Lord, art seen face to face, and that thy cloud standeth over them, and that thou goest before them by daytime in a pillar of a cloud and in a pillar of fire by night. Now if thou shalt kill all this people as one man, then the nations which have heard the fame of thee will speak, saying, Because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land which he sware unto them, therefore he hath slain them in the wilderness. And now I beseech thee, let the power of my Lord be great, according as thou hast spoken, saying, The Lord is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. Pardon, I beseech thee, iniquity of this people according unto the greatness of thy mercy, and as thou hast forgiven this people from Egypt, even until now." Now you will note that how God described himself to Moses Moses reminded God of that already, because the Lord is long-suffering and of great mercy. That's the same thing that God just told him last Sunday morning. But again, the circumstances changed when God saw Moses' love for God's people and his faith in God. And God pardoned the Israelites. However, there were still consequences for the sin. Because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice, surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them that provoked me see it. God said that those men who had seen his glory and witnessed his miracles, but did not obey his voice, would not see the promised land. So all the men 20 years and upward would die during the 38 more years of wandering in the wilderness. There were only 2 exceptions to that rule: Caleb and Joshua. As part of the judgment in Numbers chapter 14, verses 36 through 37, the men which Moses sent to search the land, who returned and made all the congregation to murmur against God by bringing up a slander upon the land, even those men that did bring up the evil report upon the land died by the plague before the Lord. Now this so scared the Israelites that they rose up early in the morning and gat them up into the top of the mountain, saying, Lo, we be here, and will go up unto the place which the Lord hath promised. However, it was already too little too late. Why didn't they do it when God originally told them? They were too scared. Now, when they see the consequence of sin, they say, well, I want to go back and have a do-over. It's too late. There's no do-over. The people, even after Moses told them, no, you don't want to do that, you don't have the protection of God, the people defiantly went ahead toward the hill, even though, like I said, Moses nor the Ark of the Covenant went with them. And as a result, in Numbers 14:45, then the Amalekites came down, and the Canaanites which dwelt in that hill, and smote them and discomfited them even unto Hormah. This is an example of God's truth in Psalm 127:1. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain. You can't do it on your own. There's a lady at work who likes to remind me all the time that, Roy, you're such a good person. No, I'm not. I'm filthy flesh. But there is a God that lives within me that is holy and perfect. And if there's any good in me, it is only because of God residing in me. And that goes for y'all as well. I'm not trying to insult anyone. None of us. As long as we are still in this human weak flesh, we are all filthy. But God who lives in us is good. And we should allow that goodness of God to shine through our lives for others to witness. But had they faith in God's faithfulness from the beginning, none of those bad things would have happened, because faith defeats discouragement. Just like I told that woman at the doctor's office, God is good. Trust in Him. I told her specifically, cast your cares upon God, because God cares for you. That's all you got to do. It sounds so easy, but it's really not. We know that. But once you use your faith, you can defeat discouragement. Friends, it is way too easy to fall into discouragement in this world. In fact, Satan loves to tempt us into discouragement. And Satan tempts us into discouragement with things like fatigue and fighting with others and with fear. But if you want to defeat discouragement, you need to remember these 3 biblical principles. Thankfulness defeats discouragement, forgiveness defeats discouragement, and faith always defeats discouragement. And of course, another way to defeat discouragement in your daily Christian walk with Christ is to be sure to be right back here in your rightful place next Sunday morning as we conclude our continuing Bible study series on the life lessons that we can learn from the life of Moses, as we learn how to be close to God forever.